the podcast discussing Montgomery County, Maryland, and beyond issues where you are part of the show. I'm your host, Jason Makstein, and today we have co-host Esther who will be joining us shortly, and Kennedy PTA President Ricky Ribeiro to talk about safety and security in MCPS. For this episode, we'll be discussing general safety and security in MCPS with a special focus on Kennedy High School, which is a window into the many issues going on in our schools. Our chats will be open for questions and comments all the time, so chime in and your comments may end up on the stream. With that, I'm going to hand it off to Ricky to get started with the material and get a screen share here going.
Thank you for having me, Jason. While you get the screen share up, this is a topic that I have been building a subject matter expertise and advocating heavily in for the last few years. So I'm happy to share what I've learned in my journey thus far.
All right, you should be good to go, and just let me know.
Yeah. So if you want to go to the next item, the next slide. So I'll start with an area where my advocacy first started. So my first bit of testimony to the Board of Education was actually a co-testimony with the PTA president at the time at BCC High School, Lyric Winnick. And the two of us both testified because we had several serious incidents happen at our kids' respective high schools related to bathrooms. At BCC, it got covered actually very well by the BCC student newspaper, the BCC Tattler, about some students, I guess, who had drunken alcohol and passed out in the bathroom, and students stumbled upon it. There was also reports in the Tattler about drug use and distribution in the bathrooms. And we had the same thing going on at Kennedy High School. We had reports of overdoses of students using and dealing in the bathrooms. And so that was an inflection point, and that was where I did my first bit of advocacy, where I raised the alarm to the Board of Education in that testimony. And the two of us as PTA leaders were saying, hey, MCPS, you have a systemic problem here. Like, it's not just one high school, it's multiple high schools. And the two of us were attempting to sort of be canaries in the coal mine in that instance. I also, and as you have up on the screen, as a result of that testimony, several media outlets spoke with me and reached out, one of which was the Washington Post. And I shared my perspective as a parent about what I had been seeing and hearing from our school community at John F. Kennedy High School. Jason, I don't know if you're on mute.
Yeah, thank you. I was on mute. Yeah, so I know from what I've heard from like a lot of people across the county is that not only are the bathrooms like a major issue, but they're also like very inconsistent. So some schools only have one or two bathrooms open, and the rest are locked to for security reasons, and others have them all open.
Yeah.
And there's stuff going on in bathrooms at every single school in the county, from what I've heard. And it's just an ongoing issue. And even the superintendent and the Board of Education, they I think added vape detectors to the bathroom, so they're aware that it's an issue, and they know it's an issue, and it's something that will continue to be looked at. So
here's what's concerning to me about the issue. This issue popped up again in the 2022-2023 school year. When I first brought it up to our then principal, they were like, yeah, we're aware of it. We're taking the doors off the bathrooms. And I felt like, doesn't seem like that'll solve the problem. But, I was like, I'm a parent. What do I know? Sure enough, it didn't. And I want to say in the time span of January to February 2023, we had about 4 overdoses at Kennedy, despite them removing the doors of the bathroom. Here's my concern. So I say that to say that I don't know that the school system has actually found a solution that will work. What I have heard since then is, we need more teachers monitoring the bathroom. So there's been a push from principals to enlist teachers to, sign up to do bathroom patrol, basically. Here's my problem. Our teachers are already stressed. They're already stretched thin. They don't have capacity to even do planning and grading. And we're going to take that time away from them to have them do bathroom monitoring. The other thing at the time that came up was some schools don't have enough female security guards to even do the bathroom monitoring of girls' bathrooms. And then, with the Juul settlement, yes, you're right. The vape detectors were bought, and I understand they're being implemented. Here's the problem: before we got the vape detectors that they're buying now, they did a pilot. The pilot was mixed. There was no great results. Some schools were like, yeah, a lot of false alarms. Some schools were like, yeah, even though we had the alarm, we couldn't tell which kid did it, because like if the detector goes off and 6 kids run out of the bathroom, how do you know which kid was doing the vaping? And I have been asking repeatedly, what's going to be the standard operating procedure? How are you going to use this technology? And what's going to prove, what measurements are going to be put in place to see if it's even effective? I've not heard any answers. There's been no good answers. So I'm worried we're going to throw a bunch of money. Well, I guess the money was gifted to us, so maybe that's why we're not being that judicious with it. But we're going to spend money installing these detectors. There's no money, by the way, for maintenance when the kids inevitably tamper with it. And then I have yet to hear any kind of operating plan or procedure for what to do when the detectors go off. Who's responding? What's the consequence? What actually happens? So it seems like it could just be us dumping money into something that actually doesn't solve the problem.
Yeah, the maintenance thing is a great point about that I hadn't really heard many people talk about, because it's not just the initial wave; it's that you have to continue to keep them up, and yeah, kids are gonna mess with things and stuff like that. So
Inevitably, absolutely. Great.
all right, should we move on to the next slide? And by the way, I just
There's
apologize.
some questions coming in, so I didn't know if
Oh,
you wanted
already? Okay, I haven't
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure we share everywhere, and then so give me 1 second, then we'll get on the questions. Were they specifically about the schools, or sorry, the bathrooms?
Um, there was one about where the money is going, and that's actually the question that I have. What I understand in terms of, so again, I just, for those who might be joining, the money for the vape detectors that are currently being implemented is coming from a settlement with Juul, which is a vaping company. And they had, I believe these settlements were with multiple states. And so Maryland was one of the states that settled with Juul. And as a result, MCPS is getting a portion of that money. Again, how that money is going to be used, what I understand is some of it is to the detectors themselves, and some of it is to additional staff. But that split, I'm not exactly sure on. I don't know if the superintendent has been that transparent, but it would be nice if he is.
Okay. And yeah, I will, once I get rolling here, I will start looking at some of the other questions as well. So
Great.
all right, let's move on to the next one.
Sure. So this goes back to another one that I've been talking about. So let's talk about data. So when it comes to safety and security incidents, we have a big data problem. For everyone's education, the principals have a lot of say into how, whether or not an incident is tracked and reported. So there's like serious incidents and then incidents. And then again, the discretion for whether something is or isn't a serious incident is guided by the judgment of the principal based on some criteria that MCPS has set, the MCPS and the state have set forth. The problem is, and this was discussed as evidenced in this article here from reporting of a board meeting, that discretion allows for a lot of potential cover up of incidents. And so I was really refreshed to see that was an open conversation that the board had. And that's something that I've heard anecdotally from many people within MCPS who say, oh, this thing happened at the school, but my principal never reported it, or, it never got out, it never got logged. And part of me doesn't blame the principals, because principals are judged based on the reputation of their school, and if, and their own performance is also measured whether or not people think it's a good school. And so if there's a constant stream of bad news and bad incidents coming out about that school, their performance could be called into question. Maybe they might lose the support of the community or students and teachers. And so what happens is we don't really have a great and clear picture of the level of incidents, the kind of incidents, and so there's a gap between what people perceive to be the level of incidents and then what's actually being logged and reported in the system. It was discussed, and it was discussed that there would be some investigation into how they could close that gap, but I have yet to see, meaningful follow-up.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is something that is a point of contention for school districts. If you look over at neighboring um, Virginia, where there's been a lot more push from the governor, for example, to force school districts to disclose when there's overdose incidents. There's a kind of a turf war going on between state legislatures and and obviously governors' offices and then the school districts about what should be reported as what and how and when. And I think MCPS is kind of in the line of fire for that as well, because the current approach is very subjective and murky.
And I think this is kind of, again, this is a general problem where do we want the numbers to be accurate or do we want them to look good? Because I mean, I'm in team accurate, but I understand how, those involved in the
Yes.
schools directly would want them to, look good. And, obviously we all want the schools to look good, but we don't want to hide the issues to do that.
As a parent, I want it to be accurate. I'm not interested in preserving MCPS's reputation. I'm interested in knowing what's happening, and I'm interested in knowing what's happening so we can solve the problems. We can't solve the problems if we're massaging them or disguising them as something else.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I'm just trying to figure out the
So
tech
one of
end.
the things, sorry, I
Yeah,
am
go ahead.
seeing, so Avniel is, and this is, I wanted to bring this up because Avniel is saying, when I went to Blair High School from 1998 to 2002, students smoked tobacco and weed in the school bathroom and had sex in the school bathrooms. And so I've heard this version of this. Kids have always done drugs. This is not new. This is not new. Here's what I would say. The impunity, the openness of the behavior is, in my opinion, different from when those of us who were in MCPS might have seen it. I went to Watkins Mill High School, 2001 graduate from Watkins Mill High School. And I remember, yeah, kids did smoke tobacco, cigarettes then, cigarettes and marijuana, but they would usually do it outside of the school in like the woods near the school, or they would attempt to disguise it. I don't remember ever seeing like open drug dealing in the school itself. I don't remember overdoses happening in the school. Yes, we had fights. I don't remember guns. I don't remember knives. I don't remember brass knuckles. And all of the things I just said are showing up with alarming regularity, or at least they're not as uncommon as I would have expected for a county like Montgomery County.
Yeah, so I grew up here too, and I went to the schools as well. And I mean, there's obviously like fights and stuff, but the weapons and the overdoses and stuff like that definitely seem considerably more. Looks like we've got Esther joining us here. Thank you, Esther, too. Let me see what's the best way to. I'm trying to make sure I get the comments on there. It's hard to share my screen and also get the comments up there. So next time I'll make sure somebody else is doing the sharing. But
I also, another thing that's different, and hi Esther, thank you for joining us. Another thing that M. Colombo that I think you have up on the screen that's important to point out is the variety of things that is entering our school is unprecedented. He's talking about DAT pens. What about Delta THC? There's also concern about Zyn pouches. Like the variety of things that are entering our schools, in my opinion, is nothing like what was happening in the 90s back when I was in MCPS. So I think it's a wildly different landscape.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, Ricky. I feel like I also am a Watkins Mill alumni.
Wolverines.
Yeah, 2005. And yeah, I remember in high school, we definitely, had our fair share of the fights and other things, no weapons usually. And we may have some trespassing students coming to our campus that didn't belong there. But I do think that currently in MCPS, it's a much different school. The student population and the families that are going, into our schools, that their children are just different. I know COVID has a place to play in all of this, but I think even before COVID, a lot of these things existed, is what we're hearing, and just COVID really exposed and magnified a lot of these behaviors. And so one of the things I've always kind of think about is, what role do families play in all of this, right? A lot of these incidents are starting in the community, and then they're being brought into our schools, or vice versa. It's in our schools, and then they're like, "Oh, I'll see you outside." And so we're dealing with MCPD, and we're tag teaming with MCPS, and I feel like there needs to be tagged in the families and the parents of these children. I know at the state level, they're dealing with the juvenile law changes that they're making when it comes to the repeat offenses that we're seeing with some juveniles at the age of 11, 12. That's what, fifth, sixth grade, right? They're already entering into the system. And so more definitely needs to be done because children cannot access their education if they're not safe.
Okay, I figured out how to get the slides on the screen and the chat and be able to
All right.
administer. So yeah, we are good to go now. So, but yes, thank you, Esther, for that too.
Yeah. I don't know if you want to move on to your next item or if there's any more points on data. Esther, I know I've seen you. I know you're always advocating for accuracy and transparency. So I don't think this is a point of disagreement that MCPS needs to be honest about its safety and security data, which, by the way, they're not even doing their at-a-glance reports, which used to be how they would update the public on safety incidents at the school level. That hasn't been updated since the 2021-2022 school year, and that's something I've pointed out to MCPS.
Wow. And I know one of the things that they always say is you trade quickness for accuracy, right? But there is a balance. If it's a critical emergency items, we're hearing parents say, no, as soon as you lock down the school, tell me immediately, even if you don't have the details, tell me something is going on immediately versus, and then follow up with accuracy. Well, at this time, this happened, that happened. So I do think that we need to have better balance between quickness and accuracy so that families and parents and all stakeholders feel like they are truly aware of what's going on in our schools, because they've tried to hide it for so long. And I think it's just, I guess, eroded trust. And once trust is eroded, now you have a whole new layer of issues that we're seeing on many different trusted systems in our society, in my opinion.
Yep. All right, Jason, you want to go on to the next item?
All right, here we go.
All right, so so after a number of incidents happened at Kennedy High School, one of which I think it actually comes after this, but one of which prompted this community meeting was when we had a non-Kennedy student burst into the building to attack a Kennedy student with a knife, and he basically ran through the halls and was able to stab at the students and security guards, and a security guard actually got injured in the incident. As a PTSA, we called for a community meeting, and so we invited several board members from the Board of Education, our council member who represents our school community, council member Fanny Gonzalez, parents, teachers, students. We had everybody come together and we had a conversation, and in that conversation, which was covered by a couple of news outlets, we had many people voice their concerns and their frustrations with the current state, which had been going on for some time. And I think, anybody who's watching, I would encourage you, if you're a parent, a student, or a teacher, and there are a number of incidents going on in your community, to press for these kinds of things, because I think a lot of us don't speak out publicly about these concerns. We might privately talk about it at birthday parties or pool parties or, in neighborhood conversations, but making sure that MCPS understands that we don't think this kind of stuff is okay, that it shouldn't be normalized. And one of the reasons why I felt like it needed to be elevated to a community discussion is I felt like this kind of violence or chaos was being normalized, and that's not okay. It's not fair to our students. It's not for our teachers who want to come to school to learn, to build community, to grow, to expect that this kind of incident is okay. And so having that community conversation where we spoke as a community to the officials who are in charge. And we also proposed some solutions. I don't know if you want to go to the next slide. I think one of them has some of the comment cards that we solicited from the community meeting. But I believe that kind of organizing and conversation is critical to the first step, which is making the school system aware that we care about these incidents and that we want them to do something about it.
Yeah, I think we've got those community discussion ones near the end You want me to skip ahead, or should we got quite a few comments
yeah.
here. I just want to, say appreciate the comments. We're not going to get to all of them. Obviously, there's a lot, but that's kind of the whole point. So let's put a few up here.
If you just want to flip to the slide that shows the community meeting, then
Okay,
it just really shows what we did.
Then. Okay, I think it is. All right.
Yeah, that one right there. Yep, one before. Yeah. So this was the community meeting that we called as a result of the incident I mentioned in April of last year. And again, I appreciated everyone who participated in it. And if and again, these were ideas from the people who have to be in the building, right? Like their opinion matters the most. And so we wanted to make sure people understood the kinds of things people wanted to see, and that the Board of Education heard directly from the people who are impacted by the system not ensuring that the learning environment is truly safe and secure. So again, I would encourage anybody who cares about this topic and wants to, or has a number. I wasn't saying this because I just saw what happened at Walt Whitman, where there was a very concerning fight that's circulating on social media. Walt Whitman, I would encourage you all to organize and say, hey, this is not okay. What are we going to do to disrupt this? I remember I was reading in the news that Richard Montgomery had a number of incidents where, like, I remember some students from Gaithersburg High School apparently got into the school and robbed a student at gunpoint in the bathroom at Richard Montgomery. Like, when those things happen, I think we need to say, hey, this is not okay. We need to have a conversation. Something is wrong. Something is broken. What are we going to do about it? As opposed to the perfunctory community letter, oh, students will be disciplined according to the code of conduct and learning will resume as normal tomorrow. No, that's not enough. I need more than that. As a parent, I pay good money, tax dollars to go to live and exist in this county. I entrust the school system with the well-being of my child. I'm going to need more than that.
Yeah, and actually, speaking of other communities and speaking up as well, I actually someone sent me a community letter today from Sherwood High School. There was an incident where the two students, I don't know exactly. I don't have it. Actually, I do have the text from it right here. Okay. So it said a note was sent home that says, as a result of disagreement with another student, a student may have brought a knife to school, and two knives were found on the person's. So I think that when they mean is not a knife may have been brought to school, but actually two knives were brought to school. It may have been part of a disagreement, I think is what they meant to say. But that was just literally today. Someone sent that to me right before this show. And, I felt that definitely it was worth, discussing. And, yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, these incidents are affecting every level or quality or whatever you think. Like, it's not just in one part of the county, right? I'm, of course, speaking from the vantage point of Kennedy, because that's where my son goes to school, but it's everywhere. It's in whatever you consider to be the good schools, the bad schools. It's everywhere. It's everybody's problem.
Mm-hmm. Right. And that's one of the things I was trying to get perspective on, because my sons are in elementary, middle school. And so we're not in high school yet, but truly trying to get an understanding of, is this an outlier? Is this the average? Is this representative of the entire population of secondary? Just trying to get perspective for parents to know, what do I do with this information, and how can I, assess from my own cluster on my family's level, what can be done.
So that's a great point, Esther, because there's been a lot of conversation about action. So I obviously, as a high school PTA president, I am very tuned into the issues at the high school level. But I have heard from so many elementary school parents who feel like the elementary schools have a number of safety and security issues that have been neglected and not been followed up on. One of which is behavior issues in the classroom. I'm hearing reports from, and some of them have made their way to the board. At the operating budget hearing, I heard from a teacher who talked about the injuries that were happening to the teachers as a result of behavior in the classroom. I've heard of, a number of students reporting not feeling safe due to bullying that is not being followed up on by school leadership. And so that's one of the reasons why Taylor is investing something like 30 security assistants for the elementary level. And we have to remember that most elementary schools don't have dedicated safety and security staff, whereas at least our middle and high schools do.
Right. And, one of the reasons to get ahead of any potential incident that may occur at elementary school is just taking a national view that the worst school shooting happened at elementary school,
I
even
didn't
more
even get to that.
local.
Yep.
Right. And we can definitely, I don't want to steal your thunder, but I do think that there is a valid case to be made when it comes to school safety, and looking at even your scorecard here of the low-hanging fruit stuff, like making sure doors lock behind you, making sure that there are those monitoring magnetic double doors, ensuring that it takes more than one door to make their way inside. So I do think that there are some elbow grease type things that isn't going to cost a lot of dollars from a budgetary standpoint that we can do. Sadly, sometimes when I'm driving by the school, like next to the daycare, I've seen school doors, back door open because I guess maybe it was too hot in the room. And so they've trying to air it out. Well, this is the unsecure door where kids, and so there are things that we can do as a school that I feel like would really help us to take that first step before really spending a lot of dollars. The cost benefit is there.
Yeah, and also, so Jon Snow is writing something that I've been looking into lately this past week, which is that I was alerted by like many people inside MCPS about a plan to cut the elementary school security specialist program, which included 12 specialists that were assigned to different clusters, and they were told the program is closing at the end of the year. Head of MCPS Security, Chief Marcus Jones, responded that this is in the newly proposed budget. Their positions are being repurposed, and there's a plan to have security assistants at elementary schools. And Dr. Taylor requested 53 additional security assistant positions to assist. But there's a few problems with this. At least, I'm still trying to dig and figure it out. I'm not an expert on this, but the the specialists are over a whole cluster, so they come in and they're like, all right, they test the doors, they test like all these different security parts. Is kind of like an audit system, whereas the security assistants are kind of more just like the security that's in the school. They're not an expert on this and going around and like proposing ways to improve the overall security. So yeah, and the other thing is that there's 52 of them being added. I think maybe there was 30 beforehand or something like that. Somebody say that?
No,
30?
52 is total, and then 30 will be dedicated to elementary. So the rest would go to middle and high.
So 30 though to what are we? 110 elementary school?
Yeah.
120 elementary schools.
Yeah.
So we're talking about, 1/4 of elementary schools have these, whereas the security specialists went around to all the different schools and were able to do it that way. So I think that there's definitely some, issues with this idea, and like we need to look into it more. Like I literally just found out about it last week, and I don't really know a lot about all the different aspects of this. So it's something I'm still kind of trying to understand, and watching the videos where they're talking about it, and it's really not very clear to me. So it's something that I'm definitely going to keep digging on, but I think that is, a potential, major issue. So.
Yeah. And this last comment from a fiscal standpoint, because I'm always trying to then reconcile our request with can we afford it and what can we afford. And I would anticipate or hope that, like we said, if 127, 130 elementary schools and a limited amount of resources, that maybe they're allocating it first to with the schools with the most incidents.
That's what Superintendent Taylor said.
Right. And so I could see that for sure, but that's still very reactive. And I feel like the manifesto, or even in our school system, like their manifesto said, elementary school kids are easiest targets, right? And so we know that there's a vulnerability there that we want to keep in mind and keep as a factor, even if we're just looking at number of incidents. That is reactionary. We need to be proactive.
Looks like we got a question for you, Ricky. Did any actions come out of the Kennedy community meeting, and have there been any changes?
Man, this is a tough one. So So what an action that happened, I'll start there. One action that happened is we did have the Department of System-Wide Safety and Emergency Management do an audit of the school, right? To look into what our vulnerabilities were, where what the problems were, and make some recommendations for solutions. That audit was completed in June. When I saw the completed audit, I immediately began asking school leadership, also system leadership about, okay, great, we've got this audit, you've got recommendations, we're moving, what's happening, when and how. Um, and I'll be honest, nothing happened for a long time. Um, we started having conversations and monthly meetings with different people within MCPS, including, and I apologize, I've now learned all these MCPS acronyms, so I'm going to say them out loud so that way you're not confused. But the department that is now called the Office of School Support and Improvement, which was called the Office of School Support and Wellbeing back then, they were involved. The Department of System-Wide Safety and Emergency Management was involved, the MCC PTA, et cetera. So we were meeting monthly. We were talking about the issues and hoping to get progress checks and updates. And I'll be honest, progress didn't happen, and solutions didn't manifest the way that I would have hoped. If anybody has ever tried to work with MCPS to move solutions forward, that's not atypical. Unfortunately, that's very much a thing that they do. Well, they'll hold the meetings, and the meeting is the progress, and that's not progress for me. Unfortunately, due to the recent incident that happened at our school on January 23rd, where a student entered Kennedy with a gun, that seems to have prompted them to actually start to act on some of the audit recommendations. So, to answer the direct question, did actions come out of the meeting? The most tangible thing was the audit, which gave us a very clear picture on what needed to be solved, but it wasn't really acted on until another concerning incident kind of forced their hand.
Yeah, no, that's unfortunate that, again, we're taking a reactionary view on how to improve the safety, because every time it seems like it's escalating, right? We don't
Hmm.
want another Magruder incident to happen. Because
Yep.
I think for me as a parent and as a mom, I think there are certain things that if I am proactively coming to you and making you aware of concerns, and multiple people are making you aware, then I'm going to be less than understanding if, God forbid, I've entrusted you, like you said, with my child, and safety is our utmost priority, but then safety things that could have been done was not done timely.
Hmm. Yep.
Oh,
Jason, I didn't know if you wanted to jump to another one of our topics here and that we've got.
Yep. I was just gonna let me go back to where we were, and then we will move on from.
So yeah, if you go forward, actually, I want to talk a little bit about this incident. All right. So I talked a lot about drugs, and I think we were having conversations about, we were having conversations about drugs. And one of the ones that is definitely was not around back when, I'm not going to age us, when Gen Xers and millennials might have been in MCPS high schools, is fentanyl. And so the Kennedy community really, we got a very jarring, um, firsthand experience with this, where we actually lost a student. Her name was Ashley Edwards, due to fentanyl overdose. And this, if you want to go to the next slide, her mother, Edith Montalban is her name. If you go to yeah, she actually testified at the Board of Education. She speaks Spanish only, so she had Omar Lazo, who's a community advocate, and he translated for her. But she basically went to the board and said, "Look, you guys have narco student drug dealers at Kennedy, and that school is not addressing it." And this is the translated version of what she said, where she talked about how she lost her daughter to an overdose, and when she asked for security at the schools, and look for resources, right, to get her daughter help, because she knew her daughter had been using and she was trying to get her help, but the system, those gaps and cracks in the system, unfortunately, did not save her daughter. And so I'm bringing this up because when we talk about these dangerous substances getting into our kids' hands, and I'm listening to podcasts and a lot of different things where, like, they're accessible via Snapchat. Like Snapchat is one of the very easy ways where kids can get their hands on substances, and sometimes they don't even know that they're taking fentanyl because they're counterfeit Percocets or pills that they think are something, and then they're laced with fentanyl, and it can end very quickly. And if you go to another slide, we actually had a guest speaker come to Kennedy to speak about it. The next, so Dr. Rahul Gupta. If you go forward one more,
all right.
a few more.
I guess I got him a little out of order.
I know it's okay. We're moving. One
Here we
more.
go.
Yeah, this was the article. So Dr. Rahul Gupta came and he spoke to our school community. He was in charge of drug policy for the then Biden administration, and he was also a former Kennedy student. And he spoke about the dangers of fentanyl. He also did a Narcan demonstration, and he also talked about his own experiences when he was an MCPS student about being approached for drug use, and how he turned that down. So this is a very serious topic and a very important one to be having with your children. It's important for the school to have it. It's important for the community to have it. I also think it's really important for the police to be very involved in this conversation. And I would say, Kennedy High School is in the 4th district. And so Commander Smith, I think, has been doing a great job of, he uses Twitter, and he posts, when they're catching large supplies of this stuff and getting it off the streets. I think that is a community issue that we all have to be involved in addressing and solving. And even Councilmember Fanny Gonzalez also supported some legislation, I believe, at the Maryland Assembly level that is increasing the punishment for fentanyl distribution. So this is a very important topic for us all to be paying attention to, because it's a life or death situation.
Yeah, and I know, like, even my 9 and 7-year-old kids, like, I've already had the conversation many times about, you don't take pills from anyone, you don't take candy from anyone. Like, if somebody gives you something, just don't take it. Because it really is that much of you get the wrong pill and that's it. It's not, when we were kids, you could get a whole bunch of them, and as long as you don't take them all at once, you're pretty safe. And now it's literally just one pill. Your first time can be it. So
Yeah, and
definitely a huge issue.
I'm really glad you said that, Jason, because I was trying to find a modified version of that again for elementary and middle school parents that are out there listening. And I agree, it's exactly that, right? In high school, the drug of choice may be fentanyl or cannabis or other things. But I do think in the elementary school and middle school, and I've had to deal with this with my kids, it's just saying no to anyone giving you anything, or recognizing if a drink, it has been opened, don't drink it, or if don't leave your drink unattended, or don't, so I think there are other things that we can tell our children now that will serve them well as they get to high school, to just learning to say no and being safe on what they're putting in their bodies. So now it may be candy or an previously opened Prime. Like for me, it was the Prime drink that I said was forbidden. You went and gave a kid $1 to buy a Prime drink and brought it home and shared it with his brother. And I'm just like, oh my goodness, right? And so it's like things like that, that's age appropriate, to be able to say, here is how you can keep yourself safe. And then as we get older, introduce other things that may be more, fatal.
We've got a few comments in here. Can we take a sec to do those? Is that good with you guys?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so Christine Garner said Kennedy has received more security staff and has worked diligently to ensure that only Kennedy students and staff can enter the building. So I just wanted to kind of put that up there while we're still, talking about that. And I guess that's related to the community meeting response, is what I'm guessing.
Yeah, I don't know if Christine is a teacher at Kennedy. I will say yes. After the most recent incident, they definitely have increased the staff. After the gun incident on January 23rd, there definitely has been a notable increase. But I was responding to the question about what changed after the original community meeting in April of last year. Yeah,
gotcha. I just want to, I'm all about like diverse perspectives, so I just want to make sure we're, highlighting what people have to say, even if it's yeah. All right. Okay, so the next one, Cara Dow McNulty At the high school my child attends, they claim they require IDs visible on lanyards at all times and that they regularly do hall sweeps, but in reality, neither of these are enforced. They are unenforced policies. If you don't have your ID showing, no consequences. If you ignore a request to clear the hall and go to class, no consequences. Are other schools like this where policies that are supposed to create a safe environment are not actually enforced? It feels like lip service.
Kara, I heard no lies. I heard no lies, Kara. This has been my big criticism of the ID policy. It is a policy on paper with no enforcement. And as anybody who has teenagers or deals with teenagers know, if you put up a boundary, they are going to test it. And so the children are very much testing the boundaries of an ID policy that has no teeth. I will say, some schools are probably better at it than others. Some admin teams are probably more vigilant than others, but based on what's been discussed at the board, that inconsistency is showing up. The student member of the board rightly pointed this out. There have been students who've testified at the board that the ID policy is either a joke or not implemented with fidelity. So, yeah, you're not alone.
And then it's not so much on safety, but I wonder now that we're looking into the cell phone policy, if there will be enforcement of that if we're consistently showing the students that we're going to keep implementing all of these policies and have no enforcement or consequences, they're just going to, like you said, based on just their age appropriate pushing the boundary, they won't, comply.
So I have a son at John F. Kennedy High School. My daughter goes to Odessa Shannon Middle School, which is supposed to be an away all day middle school and part of the pilots that MCPS is doing. Spoiler alert, there's a lot of kids who still use their phones at the school, even though the away all day policy is in place. So again, without teachers, without the resources to actually follow through on a policy, it doesn't really do you good.
Right. That's fair.
Okay, let's get to a few more comments here, and then we'll move on to the rest of the presentation. So Avniel said, yes, MCPS has been having fentanyl forums. I attended them with the nonprofit I work for. Police van was there with a mock room showing parents how to search their kids' room for drugs.
Yeah. I went to some of those fentanyl forums, and I do agree they were good. I actually asked MCPS if they were planning on continuing to do them, and they haven't. I don't know why.
Okay, so that was actually MCPS sponsored one, because I know I've seen some from the county as well.
It was a joint. There were a lot of logos on the flyer. MCPS hosted it. I think Montgomery Goes Purple, which is I don't know if it's a distinct nonprofit, but I know that Montgomery Goes Purple was very much involved in that, and then of course DHHS and any number of agencies all jumped in to host those. But they were held and promoted very heavily by MCPS.
Okay, we got one more quick question. I think I can handle this one. So. Echo one Echo Bravo said, wasn't the former police chief named MCPS security liaison? Where's he in this discussion? And I will say that he has been active, including in the comments when I posted about the security assistance, and he had some back and forth with some additional info about the additional security assistance, and then recommended for me to go back and watch the January 9th BOE meeting where they were discussing this. So, I do think that, it takes some courage to come out in a forum like that and, stand up for what you're saying and what position you have. So I do give him credit for that. And, I think it definitely seems like he's trying. I think whether the specific policies are effective, we still got to, figure that out. I would hate to be in these positions, because I think so many of these problems don't have a real solution where you can be like, all right, that problem's solved, right? There's just better, right? Are we ever going to be 100% safe? No, but we can be better. So I think that's part of the, what makes these questions and problems so tough, because if it was just, hey, if we spent another $10 million, everyone's going to be safe, and would everyone say, oh yeah, let's do it, right? But it's not that simple, and it's got to be, we got to look at the results of specific policies and see what works, what doesn't work. So that's, anyone else want to add anything to that?
Yeah, one of the things that comes to mind, because we know MCPS is a large school system, right? We're up to 211 schools, and the main concerns of up county is different from down county, east and west. And so one of the things that, I'm not a security person, but just one of the thoughts I've had as part of the solution is to create a list of, here are all of the safety offerings and resources that central office is offering to principals. I've always said, principals are the captains of their ship. They know their student population, they know the families, and they know their staff. And to be able to determine, give principals some autonomy to say, well, we offer you counselors, we offer you social workers, psychologists, school security, SROs, CEOs. We have this gamut of all safety stuff. What is the right combination for you as the principal to best ensure that your population is safe to learn, and then holding the principals accountable when there are incidents like this to say, well, maybe we need to recalibrate because either we're, too much one way or the other. But sometimes it just feels like we paint with too broad of a brush and offer one size fits all. And like we're seeing here with Kennedy versus some other school that either doesn't have the PTA that's thriving or have the, advocacy and the families that can speak up and elevate the concerns there, that it's just going under the radar because we're trying to look good and not be good. But definitely, I think it is a complex issue, but it is priority number one because no one is learning if they're always looking over their shoulder or feeling unsafe. There's too much mental noise.
I will say on the topic of Chief Jones, I've met with Chief Jones on more than one occasion. I've had a couple of conversations with him privately. Privately, he doesn't disagree with any of the concerns I raise or the potential solutions that I've shared with him. But I do believe he has been slow publicly to take action. Some of that slowness might be due to MCPS bureaucracy and politics. I'm not sure. But I will say that the one thing I had hoped for with him being in the role was a better, stronger relationship with the police. And I will tell you, I've heard from many police officers that ain't the case. And so, unfortunately, that gap has not closed. And so, that's what all I'll say about that. Like the one thing I did think that would improve pretty quickly with him being former chief is that, the memorandum of understanding would either be revised or updated or enhanced, or there'd be better communication between the school system and the police. Esther, I think some of what you're saying with the principals having so much autonomy, I think maybe some of that is because individual principals have their own relationships with the police. And I don't know how much Chief Jones is able to influence that, but that to me remains a big gap, and that's concerning for me.
Right. And would you put that on the superintendent or the Board of Education? Because I do think that when we had recent elections, most board members, if all but one, said that they would not bring back SROs, right? And
Yeah.
so Chief Jones, though he's the chief of security, he still has to report to either, I guess, the superintendent who reports to the board. And if they're not open to stronger and closer relationships with MCPD, then he is somewhat impotent in, doing kind of things we thought he would do and having this role created for him.
Yeah. So I want to remind everybody, and Andrea just actually put it, MCPS didn't make the decision to remove SROs, y'all. That decision was taken out of their hands by the county executive and the county council. And so my opinion on SROs, and by the way, MCPS in 2021 was actually in the process of looking at the data to evaluate the efficacy and all that. And they actually did, in my opinion, an objective analysis of the pros and cons of it. But again, that process was cut short by the executive action that just removed them. And we now have what is called the CEO model. And we don't really have data on how effective the CEO model is. This goes back to my earlier point, right? I would love to be in a position to say, how is this model working? What are the gaps? How do we improve it? But if we don't have data transparency, if we're not having open and transparent and collaborative community conversations, how do we improve? I don't know.
Right. And that's where I think being able to offer some autonomy to principals, because I think they were saying most principals wanted to keep the SROs. I don't know if the ship has sailed because, MCPD is seeing record levels of staff shortage, that if we wanted to bring back SROs, we just don't even have the
I was
manpower.
just about to say, it's for me as an advocate in this area, it's a moot point, whatever your opinion is, because we don't have the police officers to do it.
I know. It's so sad, but yeah, and I think that's where a lot of us being vocal to be like, if we were able to, I do think the pendulum needs to swing back somewhat, a lot, in order to bring in back more structure and discipline. I think recently there was, I'm not sure if it's part of your slide deck, with the teachers are now getting hurt. Right.
Yes.
I'm here to get it. I'm here to impart wisdom and to train the future generation. I should not have to endure certain things because I'm trying to access the education or give you the education that you came here for. And so physical abuse of our teachers, to me, I'm like, you've left them open to this type of work condition, and that's not appropriate. And so that's right. I really feel like safety, like superintendent has said, is even above academics. But we need to have safe schools for staff and students. If you don't, and I don't know. I mean, it's like on one hand, right? We have the absenteeism, the truancy, and all of that. But it's like at a certain point, if the student doesn't want to be there and all they're doing is being disruptive and having behavioral challenges, like everybody else want to be here to learn. So.
Here's another thing that I've learned. I've learned a lot, by the way. So to your point, Esther, when I was in MCPS high school, you could drop out of high school when you were 16.
Right, 16.
The state of Maryland, I can't remember what year they did, but they changed the law where you are now compelled to be in high school till you're 18. So you do have more kids who probably under the old system might have dropped out and been able to, that really can. And so they're there because they have to be, not because they want to be. And I think, that's where I would expect wraparound services and counseling and things to maybe help with that behavior. I have lots of questions about the efficacy of the wraparound services that don't seem to wrap around enough of our children. And then the other thing is there's a lot of, we talked a lot about the county council, the school board, and then the police, but what about the state, right? That I've heard a lot of concerns about the Department of Juvenile Services, which is run at the state level, and whether there's gaps there, and I've heard that there are gaps there. So it's a very complicated, complex system. And another thing I learned, one other thing that's really different from when Esther, you and I were probably, and Jason, when we were in school, back when we were in MCPS, there was expulsion, and like you could get expelled, and you got expelled and you went to Mark Twain. Mark Twain was shut down. There are some alt programs, but it's not, I don't fully understand it, but the parameters for being expelled are very different. And what I've learned is that there's no such thing as expulsion in the way that most people probably think of it. You can be expelled from a single school, but you're not expelled from the system. So what Montgomery County Public Schools does is they will expel you from one high school and move you to another one if you have concerning behavior.
Right. And without addressing that behavior, you're just saying
you're just moving the problem.
Right. And so I think that's where we've thrown away a lot of systems that worked in the past unnecessarily. And so I would really encourage MCPS as a system. It's like, because a lot of children are saying, I can't use the bathroom during the day because there's all of this, illegal stuff happening in the bathroom. I just want to go back to class, right? It's like kids that want to be in school and want to be there for the right reasons to learn, we need to start reprioritizing them. Because I think a lot of the conversation, a lot of the resources are going to the children that are being disruptive. And though that has a part of the conversation, I think it's dominating too much, where it truly needs to be the kids that are exceeding expectations, that are above level, like keep encouraging them to do more. Kids that are there and they want to learn, they want to, get a good education. We need to encourage and empower them to have a safe school. Then you have the children that may have family trauma, that may be coming to school, they want to learn, but they still have some barriers. We can address that. But the kids that flat out don't want to be there and are being disruptive on top of that, like we need to find alternative programs or ways to have them engaged, but they cannot keep dominating the classroom where instructions has to stop because we're trying to address one or two kids that, are determined no one's going to learn today. That needs to stop.
And I would say, I'm fairly objective. If you want to propose alternatives to traditional disciplinary methods, then I believe it is on you to prove that those methods could be as effective or more
Right.
effective than the ones that you're replacing. And instead, I don't see them doing that. I see them ripping out the old methods and replacing them with nothing, and that
Right.
doesn't work.
Right. Because that's what we're getting, where I have never in my life think I could hit my teacher, or even like
Right.
I have never even put it in my mind. I'd be floored if my kid ever thought that was appropriate, right? Like I can
Right.
only imagine as a parent hearing that news that your child did something to a teacher that is there to help them. Like, and again, I think that's where we bring back the families into the conversation to understand, is that parent raising that child correctly? Right. And if not, then maybe CPS and other things needs to step in, wraparound service. But sometimes it's getting to the root of, why did you even think that that is okay? Because it's not. And I think we are normalizing it for sure.
Yeah, and I think some of the comments are saying and I'll try not to pick on you, Avniel, but the one comment like kids will be kids. It's just a fight. There were fights when we were in MCPS. I think there's a big difference between types of fights. Like some are just pure assault, right? If we're talking
Yes.
about two willing participants, that's one thing. And it's also another thing when somebody ends up seriously injured, right? It's like when we say a fight, we're not necessarily all talking about the same type of fight. And, somebody up here said that the incident at Whitman, I haven't seen the video, but if it's like, really violent and, it's just one kid just injuring or hurting somebody, like that's a major issue, right? If we're talking about, they're just kind of fooling around fighting, that's one thing. So I think each case should be looked at separately and like that. We don't need to like generalize, okay, kids are always going to fight. I mean, yeah, they're going to fight, like my kids fight each other. It is part of like life and growing up, but like there's different levels, right? Like my kids know the rule, no heads. Like that's pretty much it. No heads, no privates, right? Like, you guys can wrestle. You can, as long as nobody's
Bleeding.
hitting people's heads on the ground or
Right.
hitting their head with their hand or whatever it is, like those are the kind of, limits that people should be, if somebody's on the ground and they're still, hitting them in the head, that's, a major issue. So I think, when we talk about fights and violence, it's important to like take each incident separately, and there may be stuff that can work with restorative justice, but then there's others where they don't want to. And then here we go, here's one that just goes right to what I was about to say, right? Sometimes it re-victimizes victims. If you got like 5 kids
100%.
that beat up one, especially, right, and then you have the 5 kids against the one in restorative justice, and it just makes things that much worse. So I do think that there is a place for that when it's done right and when it's done for the appropriate situations. I don't think it's a one size fits all thing. So
Right. And I think that's where more information should be shared with the community to understand maybe there's a scaffolding or what that rubric looks like for the magnitude of the fight, the rationale behind it, the number of people, the outcomes of, trauma. Like there needs to be more than that. And then I think there should be a place for the victim if they want restorative justice or not, right? Because to exactly like we're saying, or even if the parent, it's like, no, I don't want restorative justice. I want justice. There needs to be but you never know what happens to the other child because that's privacy and all of that stuff. But I think that's where we need more clarity and accountability of actions to prevent it from happening in the future and intensifying. Because I know, thinking back with my child, he has an IEP and some behavioral challenges. And sometimes it's, well, if I don't know that you've been disciplined, I don't take the discipline into my own hands. But something's going to, consequences will be rendered, whether it's me or someone else, right? And so we need to be clear that enough will be done that everyone feels like there's no need for escalation.
yeah, well said. And I don't know if people notice, I'm just kind of sorting through most of the comments that are staying on topic. There's a few not quite on topic and kind of skipping through those, but trying to make sure everyone is heard and just kind of rotating through the comments as we're having this discussion. Should we move on to one of the other slides for now, and we can keep going through some of the comments, or is there anything specifically? Okay, Ricky's got to leave shortly. Okay, that's fine. Like what, like 5-10 minutes left, or
Exactly. Yeah.
okay. All right, and then maybe Esther, are you good to continue on?
Yes.
We can discuss a few more comments after that.
Yeah.
So let's get through. Is there any specific slide that you wanted to talk about, Ricky, before?
I think we covered a lot. I mean, I guess if you want to look at let's go to the video with the knife incident, because actually that
Okay.
brings up another topic that's come up a lot. This one.
Yep. So
you've got go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we redacted. This is my video, because one of the things, if you notice, I didn't share the Board of Education video from YouTube because of permissions. You're not allowed to share on a stream another person's video. However, this is my video, plus there's no sound. So you see, very clearly, and then this is the slowdown. This is actually with the knife. He was being restrained by security and still took a swipe at the security guard with a knife. And this was a trespasser that was not from the school. That's right? Correct, right?
Yeah, he was a non-Kennedy student. That's correct. The reason why I wanted to bring this up is there's a lot of, if you look at a lot of the incidents, particularly incidents where there's video, you see a lot of admonition from MCPS about recording. And I have mixed feelings. My background is in journalism, so I believe in freedom of press. I believe in documenting. I believe in things like that. And frankly, without video evidence, a lot of incidents get minimized. But it is a fact that some of these kids are literally staging these fights to record them and post them on social media. So it also is a problem. And I think this is something that is important to wrestle with and to navigate. I believe that MCPS needs to come up with a policy that says if you document the videos and the purpose of the documenting is for reporting it or as evidence gathering, that should be protected, or even for publication on the student newspaper, I believe that should be protected. But if you're documenting to humiliate someone or bully them or to use it for non-civic reasons, then I can see a reason why you might want to discourage that behavior. And I think this is going to be an issue that we have to continue to debate about, because I don't think there's any clear-cut answers, because I think we could look at one incident and say, yep, that's a reasonable reason to record, and others like, you were just looking to humiliate someone, and that maybe wasn't. And I don't know how you come up with a policy that solves for both of those things.
Yeah. No, that's a very interesting take, and I think that gets back to the banning the cell phones in school, because I agree with you that with the broken communication or ineffective communication we have right now for parents and our school system, a lot of parents go directly to the child, right?
Yes.
And so that's where some parents are like, no, like I want my child to have their phone on them all day, because I don't feel that if something was to happen, that the school would have open communication or timely communication with me about the status of my child. And I think that was part of the discussion at the state level when they're discussing the current cell phone bill, is where some parents, just need that trust to be improved, that they can say, with my child not having a phone on them readily available to communicate at all times, that I'd be safe. I'll feel safe without,
And this was really, again, I pay attention to the region, because here's another thing. I think MCPS we exist in a DC metropolitan region. None of the things that you see in this deck, in this presentation, in this conversation, are unique to only Montgomery County. I believe Montgomery County Public Schools should be having conversations with neighboring school districts to learn from each other. What's Alexandria doing? What's Arlington doing? What's Prince George's doing? What's Howard doing? How do we learn from each other instead of each individual school district learning in isolation and by itself? And the reason I bring that up is I pointed out in one of my testimonies to the board that look at I want to say Prince William County. There was a student there who is currently suing the school district because he got jumped by a group of students, and the principal at the school did not report the incident, the severity of the incident according to what actually happened. The father didn't realize how bad it was until he got to the school, and then because other students recorded the incident and shared it with the father, that was how he was able to understand what exactly happened to his son. Because if he relied only on the school and the principal to tell him, he would not have gotten the truth. So that's why I'm like, I'm not sure. I'm not sure. I think I don't know. I'm torn. I'll be honest. I'm torn.
And unless all of the fights are happening in the bathrooms, then that would make me look at the camera system within our schools, and
Mm-hmm.
it's adequate. That again, in
Right.
order for me as a parent to feel like I can trust the school system to have an adequate account of what happened, well, are there any blind spots? Are there places in the school that students can go and hurt my child that you won't be able to at least have video of it for documentation and evidence? So I think that gets back to infrastructure. So I agree with you. I think, cell phones have its place only because we don't have adequate infrastructure and trust with parents for them
Yeah.
not to give their kids phones in elementary school, or not for them to have it on their person in the classroom.
And one of the ways they could mitigate the social media aspect of it is, and I learned this afterward, there's apparently a digital team at Montgomery County, in the Montgomery County Police Department, that can reach out to social media networks to take down concerning posts and content. And again, I just, with the gap between MCPS and MCPD, I don't know how often they talk. I don't know if there's a free flow of information for them to move in a way that's agile and proactive and not only reactive. So again, it would be great if we're having conversations about how we solve these problems, but that doesn't always seem to be the posture of the school system. It instead seems to be, how dare you record, please stop recording.
Right. And that's how it has come across. It's like, well, that's not the root problem. That's the symptom that, like now we can have, the community has access into what's going on in our schools. So now you're trying to shut down the access that we now have to be able to know if to be outraged or not. So.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was just going to say, it kind of goes back to what we started out talking at the very beginning, right? About the reporting mechanisms and are we trying to make things look good, or are we trying to be real? And I feel like the cell phone recording is a big, not symptom, but a big part of that. It's the same thing, right? They don't want them recorded. I mean, I understand the social media aspect and, kids doing it for social media, or like using the social media to bully a kid that got beat up or something like that. However, without people reporting on these incidents, we wouldn't know how bad they were, because you go back to that, like that letter to Sherwood High School, right? It's just like, well, we took knives away. Well, it doesn't tell you anything about what actually happened. Similarly, I think the trespasser with knife one, until the video and the media started kind of, I don't know, say spreading stories, but spreading the information out there, it was just a very basic letter, was it not? And another incident happened at Northwest High School. There's an incident where a assistant principal was like assaulted by a student, essentially.
Yep.
And they put out this letter like, the assistant principal had a medical emergency and had to leave. And then us and some other, reporting places got more information about what happened. And the next day they had to send out another letter clarifying that they were assaulted by a student. And that's what happened. But without the cell phone videos, without the media talking about the social media, just people, they would rather just have it be this vanilla, something happened, we're sorry. But the parents that's not what they want to know. They don't want to know, there was an incident at your school. That's essentially what these, basic ones are saying. They're not saying what actually happened. So yeah, real quick. And I know, Ricky, you probably got to go here in a minute.
Yeah, I do.
Okay. You want to get going? I just wanted to make sure I read the comments from Instagram, which there's nothing super unique there, but I just want to make sure that, because the Instagram comments don't automatically come over. So I want to make sure we're reading those too. But why don't you want to get going first, and then I'll start going back to the comments. Is that good? All right. So thank you, Ricky, so much for coming. Your knowledge and experience here, like as somebody who's actually, part of these conversations for real, not just, online, you're out there in the schools doing it. So, I appreciate what you're doing for the schools and the advocacy you do, and also appreciate you coming on the show. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. Thank you for the conversation, Esther, and talk soon.
All right.
Yeah, thanks so much.
Bye.
Yeah.
All right. So with that, I'll probably finish up through this presentation, but first I just want to so let's see. Lisa Inches09 on Instagram said security is so lax and kids walk the halls reeking of drugs. Kids spend all day in the bathroom doing drugs and skipping class. Meet Amo Damala said, what are you doing with the restorative justice program? And sorry, I know these are maybe from a while ago, so I don't necessarily know what it was referring to. Instead, do you even know what restorative justice is? So, I think regarding that, there's definitely what restorative justice is supposed to be, I think, and then there is what it ends up being in practice in many cases. I do think the kind of idea behind it is a good idea, but when in practice, it is often not that, even if you do it the right ways, because I know there's issues with training and, funding and all these different things to do it the right way. But I do think that, it's not for every scenario. That's my personal opinion. So.
Right, I agree. I do think the restorative justice is to cut down the amount of disciplinary consequences for a lot of the minority students in our schools that we're seeing over suspensions compared to their peers. And I do agree with you, Jason, that restorative justice does sound like a mature way to have people sit down and use their words and really try to come to some type of resolution. But being able to do it with fidelity, being able to ensure everyone is trained and that you have enough coaches or specialists available to engage in that. But I think also having the consent of the students is important because they're the ones that have to live with it. They're the ones that went through that experience. And so I would like to see some modifications to that program. Me personally, I'm not a fan of restorative justice, but I do understand the logic behind it and why MCPS is trying it. But we need to ensure we have adequate guardrails. We need to ensure that there is timely evaluation of if it's working, if it's not, and willing to be honest with ourselves. And if it's time to pivot, we need to pivot.
Yeah. All right, let's get to a few more of these questions. And then if we can get to the end of the questions, we can kind of go through the last couple slides. I think there's still a few, just kind of specific issues that happen that we can go through. So Holly said, do we have metal detectors in schools? Do classrooms, gym, and hallways have video cameras? No to metal detectors. I know that. I believe most areas that are not either inside a classroom or in bathrooms do have camera coverage.
Right. I think so. I think some of the questions that have come up at the public comments is monitoring. Who's monitoring those cameras? Is there live monitoring happening that if something is happening, people would timely respond to that area of the school? I think that's the question for me that, but the cameras are there. Now it's who's watching them.
Yeah. And is it used to, watch and find stuff in real time? Or is it just oh, well, this incident occurred, let's go back and watch the tapes now, which I think obviously it's good to have for several reasons for that use as well. Lisa said yes, there's video in hallways and common areas, but no metal detector. Usually after lockdown they have more security for about 1 to 2 days and then it goes back to none or whatever they had before.
Right. And that sounds like a funding thing. And it's my initial thought. That's all they can afford to offer. Because if the need was there a few days ago, unless there was a real addressing of that need 2 days later, that's just a cool off period.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it does seem to be okay, well, that's, like you said, a cool off period, right? We can prevent further incidents, retaliation, and stuff like that. But yeah, it's not necessarily the most proactive. Brenda Diaz said, what would be the resources needed to enforce a no cell phone policy? I don't think there's any specific resources. More, it's just actually implementing it and sticking to it. I think, several schools in the county are doing the pilot program with the phones away, at least during the day, and they did not get like funding or anything for that specifically.
Right. And I think there should be no cell phones in schools. Like that would be my position. I do think it's a distraction. I think that even with the Chromebooks, even, I don't know why we're still using them. But again, that's just my opinion. If they're the academics, I would leave it to them and their specialty. But I think when it comes to cell phone, ideally, students should not have their cell phones during the day, but I can see why parents would want their child to have it because other structures and relationships are not where they need to be. And so if I don't trust that when my child is in someone else's care, that they are safe at all times, then I would want to have my own personal way of keeping in touch with them. Right. But if there is adequate infrastructure and safety and a pattern of little to no incidents that are of great concern, then yeah, I'd be like, yep, I know they're safe when they're away from me and no cell phones. So I think it's not just the cell phone; it is the space and the environment and the climate and the culture right now with MCPS and families that some parents are hesitant to have their child not have their phones with them.
Uh-huh. Yeah, I mean, what about like if they had the phone but it was off? Like, is that adequate, you think, for you, as a parent? I'm not speaking as a policy wise.
I think for me and my child, understanding him, I would say no, it needs to be out of sight, off his person, away, like just gone, gone. But I think it depends on the maturity of the child, the age of the child. And so you can't really tailor a policy individual to a child, maybe by grade level or by class or by teacher. I would prefer to give that teacher or the school the autonomy to make that decision and find what works best for their student population. I am definitely not a big believer in one size fits all. I think it really needs to be tailored to a local school and the community that they're serving and what the families deem best for that school.
Hmm. Yeah, I definitely think that makes sense. I'm just trying to put up the last couple of these comments. Let me see if there's anything. Okay, this is a great point when we talk about the SROs. The video of Officer Lowry from QO is like the quintessential, really great SRO and SRO video example because it's all about, and I think, nobody wants people getting arrested like because there's officers in schools. It's about protection, keeping people safe, and building rapport with the students, right? Like, what Officer Lowry, he was going to the football games, he was going to the basketball games, he was going to the car wash fundraisers, he was going to all these different events with the community. He was part of the community. He was mentoring kids. He was, you have a kid who's getting in trouble. He knows he can come to him and like not get in trouble for the little things. He's going to protect him from getting in trouble for the big things by being proactive. And I think that is the real big value of the SRO program that we're missing is that, it's not so that they can go and arrest people in, kids for minor stuff, drug use or, fights that don't end up in somebody, severely injured. Right. So I think, that's that, and that's, obviously is my opinion, but the video there with Officer Lowry is a great video. If you just go on YouTube and Officer Lowry SRO QO should bring it up. It's like 5 minutes. It's not some, long hour and a half video like this one is. So, you should be able to watch it, and it really does great service to the ideal SRO type, in my opinion.
Yeah, and I agree. For me, my perspective when it comes to SROs, again, it's not for disciplining children. It really is in this day and age that we're living in, and school shooting, every second counts. You need someone that can match the manpower that is coming to attack and hurt your children, hurt your teachers, your staff, right? And that is an SRO. It's not for them to walk down the hall and police the hall and to just try to discipline the children. You have security for that. You have administration for that. But I do think that there is a place for SROs in our school, whether it's mentorship. I have seen when I was in MCPS where you have kids that are coming to school that are from tough homes and they want to speak with someone that has maybe been there, done that, or has seen trauma like police officers do, that can really engage with students and maybe play that mentoring role, maybe encourage them to go to class and take that extra time to just listen to them. I think all of those things that SROs used to do is lacking, and that's where we're seeing a lot of these behaviors go unchecked. I don't know if it's just the minority community, but I know in the Black community, a lot of times you have those fatherless homes and single moms of boys that, like, an SRO would be a great mentor of someone to say, like, you can go to school and make yourself something, right? You don't have to end up in jail like your dad, right? Or they may have seen a lot of trauma early in life, but a police officer came into their home and arrested their loved one. And so now they don't like that police officer. So I understand that type of trauma, but then you're given an opportunity to redeem themselves and showing a different side of police work. So I think there's a lot of missed opportunities to really help our young people truly see the benefits of SROs in our community to help us to remain safe and to enjoy our schools, enjoy our community. But I just need an honest conversation to happen and not just the executive or the county council or any type of activist telling us what we need, because what we're seeing is not adequate. It's not meeting the need. So we really need to revisit it, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, and I completely agree. I just wanted to respond to this comment. So just because an SRO is there or isn't there doesn't mean a kid is going to be criminalized for assault or not. Like, that's completely depends on whether charges are pressed by the victim, you know? So if we have SROs there, and also the SROs would come, you know, based upon whether they're called by the
admin.
principals, right? The
Right.
admin. So I think it was 97% of arrests that SROs did. This was the study, you know, 2021, whenever it was, you know, 97%. So only 3% were not, of arrests related to SROs were initiated by the admin.
Right.
Whereas just 3% were like, you know, the SRO found something or, you know, came upon something themselves. So we're not talking about like them going around looking for stuff to criminalize people for. We were talking about crimes occurring and then there is a response.
Right.
So I just think that's something that's important to highlight. Brenda said the Board of Education absolutely approved the removal of SROs. They worked together with the county council to do so. I do believe that, you know, they did support the removal at the time in 2021, which seems like, I don't know, a decade ago or something. But Lisa is saying that, you know, the metal detectors is a resource issue and money. I'm not sure it's purely money. I think there's a lot of other aspects too. I do think, you know, it's one of those things where like, hey, if we can throw 10 million at a problem and make everyone safer, most people probably agree. Maybe not everyone. But you know, that I think it's not just purely resources for that.
Right. And we have talked about, well, not we, the Chief Markets Joan has talked about that. I believe it was at a county executive media briefing where they were doing an analysis to think of all the different, you know, things that they can do. And the metal detectors came up, and there is a school system that has implemented it, and the issues and challenges that they're having, it sounded like the cost benefit wasn't there. So for example, binders, the metal in the binders kept causing the child, you know, backpack to go off. So it always required a human to look at the binders. Well, that created a backlog or bottlenecking at the front door. So there was a lot of different challenges where they're just like common day items that students can have kept triggering the metal detector, but it wasn't sophisticated enough to meet the intended need. And so maybe it wasn't something that we want to do. Plus, a lot of parents or families may feel like, well, my child is now entering prison because they're having to go through a metal detector, and it's a mental thing. So I agree. I don't think it's just a money thing, but they have looked into it. But I think right now they have not deemed it necessary for our general schools. I don't know for our alternative schools where they have mandatory backpack checking because they're an alternative program. I think that is there because they tend to more likely than not bring in weapons. But yeah, I think same thing with the detectors for the vaping in the bathrooms. There's a way to trigger that isn't really vaping happening. And so technology moves so quickly that sometimes you spend that $10 million and in 6 months to a year, that technology is no longer, meeting the need. And it's just too much to keep up with.
Yeah. And that makes sense. I think, so yeah, just going through some of these and then, we can do a few more slides. I think we can go through the slides pretty quick here, and just kind of discuss the incidents and then, how do we get SROs back in school? So like Esther alluded to earlier, we have a issue with the, number of police officers. We're now down 150 something police officers with more retirements expected. So it would be really difficult. However, the CEOs are about the same number, I believe, as SROs, community enforcement officers, who basically are assigned a cluster versus being assigned a specific high school, which I do think is good that it allows, the middle schools to get that help they need. But it also, based upon the MOE, we don't have them in the hallways. Like this comment says by Lisa. So I think that it would take, some sorry, somebody was sending me saying they love the show. So that's great. Yes. So I do think that we've kind of stepped off the ledge with the SROs, and it's hard to put the genie back in the bottle, to mix a few different metaphors. So I don't know, even if we said that CO program is exactly what the SROs had, except they can also go to middle schools, that's going to be the best you're going to get, because there are people that are politically invested in there not being SROs.
Right.
Like just on that specific wording, right? Even if CEOs were the exact same thing, which they have become more similar. And the BOE cannot vote to bring them back, specifically because the police department is funded through the county executive and the county council, and then there has to be a new agreement made. So there's kind of like multiple parties involved. There needs to be a new agreement made, which there was when we removed the SROs. We came back and there was just really, really bad issues right following COVID. Not necessarily just because of the SROs, but we, went from 2 years at home and people not, knowing what to do and stuff like that. So they almost immediately switched to a new model. So, all right, let me real quick pop back on the slides here and we can go through. We may be done with the comments. I know I really, really appreciate all the comments today like that. It makes the show longer, but I mean, I will take that every day of the week to have too many comments, because that is what this whole show is about. It's about the community being involved in it. It's not just we're talking at you. It's about you being involved. So I just really appreciate everyone on the comments, everyone on this watching it, and those watching it on the replay as well. This will be posted. The recording will still be on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. And then the podcast will be posted on Apple Podcasts and Spotify. Eventually we'll get on Amazon as well, but we're not there yet. I don't know how many people are actually listening to this on the podcast, since I think the video is great as well. The Spotify does also have a video version. So yeah, let's okay, so we went over the slide here about the fentanyl. And again, I recommend this was at 3700 of the Board of Education meeting on 2/23/23. So, watch that 5 minutes if you're interested and want to hear, about this tragic situation and what she wishes that they would do. And she wanted more information, and for that information be in Spanish. So that's I would definitely recommend, if you're interested in hearing more, to take a listen to that, because there's no, experience is the ultimate teacher, and sadly she had a terrible experience, but we can learn from that. This was the video. And just a quick note on the video, I try not to post, and I get sent a lot of videos about fights and incidents, and I don't like posting them. I don't like to, contribute to that, that, kids wanting to do it for the fame and that sort of stuff. I felt that video was very necessary to put out because it was just so much worse than they were portraying. I mean, with that knife, he really was coming at people. And, I spent 5 hours learning how to blur everyone's faces. So, I really felt that was worth sharing. But generally, I do not share anything that involves, minors fighting in particular. Okay, so this was at the beginning of this school year. So a lot of these incidents that Ricky shared with me to put in this presentation occurred this school year, or even just the last few months. This one was the beginning of the school year. This one person hospitalized after a shooting on Friday night. This was February 2024. So like beginning of like about a year ago. What they did not say was that the shooting, and not saying the MoCo show didn't say it, but this is what the public sources of information did not say, is that the shooting occurred after a Kennedy playoff basketball game, and they managed to keep us out of headlines, but the alleged shooter was a current student and the victim was a former student. Sorry about that. So, this is, again, this is a major violence issue, and it was kind of hidden that it was actually school involved. And this is part of the issue with, the way things happen. This one is a child hit in front of Kennedy High School in the bus loop, October 2024. I know there's a few people on like Blue Sky that were commenting and saying to me, hey, when you're talking about safety and security in schools, you need to talk about transportation to and from schools, vehicular accidents, because, there's a couple years ago, there was a young student very tragically run over by a bus in Montgomery County. I think it was in Rockville. Just really, really sad situation. It was like a 7-year-old kid. And, these are definitely major security risks. I know we've talked about all this other stuff, but the security on the way to and from school is definitely, a thing as well that needs to be, counted in when we're talking about school safety and security. And then the other thing is the buses. I had a friend tell me about, first of all, their kid was in a car hit by a bus from behind, a school bus from their own school, and was injured. The car was totaled. And then that same bus route is known to go through stop signs and is known to speed on highways, and possibly got into another accident. So these are the sort of issues that, like, yes, I mean, maybe it's just one thing, or, but I think that we need to, keep lookout for patterns of, these traffic violence issues as well. This was a 9-year-old pedestrian, and it was right at the school, like this, that there's, if you're driving to the school, please be careful, because there is kids there, they're walking. So just be aware.
So just kind of bringing in the current General Assembly that's in session. So some of the things from Public Safety Vision Zero that the County Council and the state have tried to implement when it comes to our safer schools is, I believe, with the bus transportation, there is they do account for whether there's sidewalks available for students that will have to walk to school. If not, I believe they're able to get buses within 1 mile or 2 mile of the school, which typically is the cutoff to start having a bus route. The latest bill that I personally am not in support of, but I can see a valid point to be made by certain community members, is there's a bill to add stop sign cameras within the school zones in Montgomery County to have similar ticketing of $40 per violation if you come to a rolling stop versus a complete stop within a school zone at a stop sign. And so that's another way that they're trying to improve the walkability of our students to our schools. But definitely when you're around school signs, usually there's flashing lights, but always try to drive slower whenever it's school hours to ensure, because kids aren't looking out for vehicles, right? If they see their bus coming, they're running and all they see is the bus. And so we just want to, as community members, stop at the stop sign of the school buses, or, if you're in a school zone, just drive slower and be more aware that some children may not have the best pedestrian safety skills.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Or, if you're driving around lunchtime and you got the kids, the high schoolers all walking out all over. I know that I've experienced that occasionally.
Yeah, I've had to yield my right of way to students getting off the ride-on bus. I'm like, I definitely got the light, but okay, go to school.
Yeah. Right. We should be happy they're in the schools.
Right.
All right, let me see. So we already went over this slide with Dr. Gupta. And so this was just a little more information about the 2 community letters since December 2nd to Kennedy High School. The left one, a shelter in place. Individual allegedly had a gun. No threat against the school. Yeah, and so that, like I said, it's not a ton of information about on these letters that I'm sure many of you have seen. And then the January 13th, unknown person in the building, trespasser, not able to locate the trespasser. And then they were talking about something that happened late January as well. So what was that? Was it a gun in the school that happened in last 2 weeks ago or something? Or am I mistaken that?
Can't remember if it was a gun in
Okay.
the school.
And then this was just a slide on the details of the incident reports ending in 2022. So this is more just to bring to people's notice that you can take a look at each school's report. Now, I will warn you, I don't believe these incident reports. I do not believe that they are fully realized. There are some schools that used to have zero, in the wealthier, maybe this one is more accurate, but I've seen some in the wealthier areas or a wealthy school where it says there were 0 fights, 0 drug incidents for the entire year, which I just do not believe at a high school. So, like you said, take it with a grain of salt, the amount of data, but this is the data that we do have on individual schools. And you can take a look at how the different schools compare on different elements. This was a letter that, Ricky wrote about, what he thinks are kind of some of the ways to improve security. I think he kind of went over a lot of this in his talk, but yeah, and same thing here. This was the PTSA letter on the operating budget from this year, talking about better security and investment in safety and security staff at Kennedy High School. I think that was the last slide, so I'll leave this up for a sec if people want to take a look. I guess you can also just pause the show. Neil says, yeah, that's lies. Yeah, I mean, we take the data we've got, and that's what we've got. So yeah, I think that's pretty much it for today. Unless do you want to close it up with anything on your end, Esther?
Yeah, no, thank you so much for everyone for tuning in live or watching the replay. We're just here to serve our community and to talk about topics that are relevant and important to you. I think school safety has been in the news often, and so really grateful to Ricky and to Moderately MoCo for providing a space for us to come and build coalition and trade notes and really try to understand what's going on and bring awareness as to what the community believes are unmet needs or things that MCPS is doing well. We need more of it. Hopefully in the future, we're able to have some MCPS folks on here that are willing to, whether it's an official or unofficial capacity, just joining on the conversation with their knowledge of what can happen, what you guys cannot do, what are some limitations. But definitely personally, so I am the president of the Montgomery County Taxpayers League, and I just wanted to also take this opportunity of privilege to invite everyone here on the call. We are having our annual budget palooza of MCPS's FY 2026 operating budget on February 27th from 7 to 9 p.m., where we take a deep dive into the money, and we will talk about safety. We will talk about everything that's important to you, where your money's going as a taxpayer. So we really appreciate you coming out tonight and your great comments. It made it for a very quick, almost 2-hour session. And so no, I'm just grateful to Jason for the opportunity to be able to, voice needs of the community and elevate this important topic.
Yes, thanks so much, Esther, for being here. For that, the Budget Palooza, I will share it for sure on social media, and I may just, I would recommend going to their actual Zoom live stream. I will probably post up a live stream as well, just on my channels, but I would definitely recommend to sign up for the actual Zoom webinar. You won't be able to comment in like this on that for mine. It will just be like a view only thing. So I would recommend signing up on their site or on their Zoom link, and that way you can join that. And like everything starts with the money, right? Like if we don't have the money figured out, we can't do any of this stuff with security and safety. So yeah. Again, thank you so much for all the comments. It really is what makes the whole point of this show. I would not be doing it if it was just me talking to people and not having the comments coming in. So I really appreciate you all being here and sticking around and, watching the whole show, listening. And we'll keep coming. I'm definitely trying to get some like actual officials on here. I was talking to the student member of the board for the Board of Education about coming on here. I would like to get the 2 finalists for the next SMOB thing. Last year, I did a video interview with each of them. I would love to have them on one of these instead so we can have questions from them live. And definitely trying to get some of our county and our Board of Education, our high-level county non-elected members and high-level MCPS non-elected members. I haven't actually approached anyone, but that's something I'm looking at. So if you're on here and you're, listening and you're willing to come on the show, we'd love to have you. If you think somebody else would be great on the show, let me know. Send me a message because right now I don't have anyone lined up for the next show. Just appreciate all the comments and the questions and everyone chiming in, especially. So, and thank you, Esther. Thank you so much. And again, I know Ricky left, but thank you, Ricky. I think having his expertise and that information was really a great show. So, all right.
Thank you.
Thanks. I'm just gonna ended the Instagram, and then here we go. All right, bye.